Hello, good evening, everyone. Welcome again to another Q&A with one of the EPP Group MEPs. My name is Kevin Purcell, and today we're talking about all things tourism. We'll be finding out about the EPP Group's plan to save summer, when we can go on holiday and what our holidays are going to look like. So in a moment, we're going to be joined by Claudia Monteiro Aguiar, the Portuguese MEP and member of the Tourism Task Force in the European Parliament. As always, please send your questions to us here and we will try to get to as many of them as we can. So I'm just going to try and connect here with Claudia, if you bear with me one moment.
Hello, good afternoon. Sorry.
That's fine. We got there in the end. How are you?
And you?
I'm very good. Maybe tell us where you are.
In Madeira Island?
Perfect. And we'll get going, I suppose. Tell us about the island. Obviously, at this time of year, it would normally be flocked with tourists from all around the world. What's it like? What's it been like for the last few months there?
Well, let me just say that as well as in other member states, and of course in all Europe and internationally, we were also hardly eaten with this coronavirus pandemic. Of course, it was symmetrically around Europe, but some member states and some regions like us, being an island, well, the impact on the economy has a different impact, because, as you know, the reliance of tourism in the GDP, for us, we will suffer a little bit more in proportion, as well as in the time of recovery. First measures were, of course, to protect people, to ensure citizens' health, to save lives. We needed to reorganize all the health system to give a better answer for the pandemic crisis, both for residents and, of course, for tourists. But then we needed to protect the destination as a whole. So closing airports and ports were, of course, the most difficult decisions that the regional government had to take. But understand that all entire population agreed on those measures, firstly to protect ourselves, and then, of course, to protect the tourism as a destination, and, of course, tourism. Let me just share with you that here in Madeira, tourism represents more or less 26% of the GDP. And what we know is that per week, we acknowledge that if we have the tourism inactive, we lose more than 0.5% of the GDP of all region. This means that per month, we are losing about 2.2%. 2 months represent 4.4% of the losers. So if you combine each week that is passing with no tourism, we will be hardly and badly impacted in our economy.
And the longer it goes on, the more difficult it becomes for maybe all those small businesses there. What will it take, do you think, to try and get people back onto the island and indeed to get tourists moving more freely around Europe?
Yes, well, it needs to be not only in Ireland, but of course in all around Europe and cross borders, because firstly, people need to build. We need to build, and people need to have the sense of trust on traveling, and then on being on a region, an island, a destination that give them that safety, that trust that they are in a region that give them conditions of the system, of the health system, but also that they can provide them a good period of vacations. So giving as example of Madeira too, we created with an external enterprise, an external company, we created a certification of the destination. So that is important for this sensitivity of trust that we need. So all the value chain is being prepared with a cope of sanitary and health conditions to bring people back. So this was one of the goals, the creation of a certification, a kind of a seal that certifies the region or the country, but in this case Madeira, saying that yes, you can come because we will give you the conditions. And of course that a whole set of rules were implemented by the government. They are voluntary. So if the enterprises, the small businesses, restaurants, business that are related directly and indirectly to tourism, if they want to, they can provide such measures that can give back a little bit of the trust that we need in these times.
I know there are a number of different issues when it comes to opening up tourism again, and I know you'll speak about the EPP Group's plan to save summer. The first one I want to talk about is planes and people flying, airports, social distancing, particularly on planes, and health checks. How will all that work, do you think?
Well, we know that airlines are passing through difficult times. Most of them have their planes landed, so they will need also a kind of a boost, a kind of help to restart. But for that restarting, you also need that member states gradually can open the borders, if we can say like this. So gradually, and having in mind all measures that are related to the healthcare, the sanitary conditions, maybe gradually we can have again airlines and traveling back into the game, if you can say like this. But that is why we asked the Commission to present some measures to be coordinated for this reopening borders accordingly to some rules. That is why on last 13th of May, Commission launched this kind of package that gives the rules or the recommendations for each mode of transport, but also for giving the rules. Well, you talked about the social distance. It's crucial to maintain that measure in all kind of modes of transport. That was one of the recommendations that we asked, and also we asked for the issue of the testing. We need to test passengers so that this trust can also be regained. And this testing of passengers needs to be done, well, in the departure for the first time needs to be there, or as well in the destinations where people are traveling. Well, here in Madeira, just to give you as well as an example that goes along with those rules, we will gradually open and reestablishing the quarantine, because nowadays we are in quarantine. Whenever you come to this destination, you need to make 14 days of quarantine. So gradually we will implement the reopening, and on July that is why also the Commission says that this reopening needs to be gradually. On July, we will have the end of the quarantine, but substituting this issue with the tests. Well, we wanted that the tests or we made when we arrive, tourists can make on the arrival, or 72 hours previously, you need to make the test and giving a proof when you are traveling. So this is a kind of measure that gives some confidence to the travel and also to the destinations. This will be implemented gradually. And also, I can leave here just for other comments, or if someone that from the people that are listening to us, we will also we will propose that, for instance, to help member states, to help regions, and also to help citizens that will travel, we will propose to the European Commission. Well, why not the Commission to buy, like with ventilators, they did that, to buy the tests, so that first we can help the regions, member states, by giving them tests also to implement in their countries, but also you can have here a help to the citizens that will travel, to the travelers, because this will be a cost, a plus on the cost of the airline tickets or other tickets that you buy for travel. So maybe this could be a measure that also European Commission could come in the near future to help tourism sector, but also here a kind of huge measure to help citizens in the cost of tickets.
Somebody just asked there, what did you think of the European Commission's plan that was announced recently? Do you think it's enough, or should it go further?
Well, of course, I wanted a little bit more. It's positive because it's a package with most of the rules that from our side, from the EPP side, on transports and tourism committee, we also have a working group, a tourism task force, where we are presenting, well, previous from the pandemic crisis, we presented several proposals, and much of the proposals that were launched by the Commission were aligned with our position. Because why? We wanted those rules so that member states can have a guidance, because, as you know, each member state did what it was better for them, but without a guidance, without rules. So in one side, it's positive. We have this package, we have rules. All the package has several attaches with, well, for instance, for restaurants, for beaches, for the next summer, there's some rules that if you have that guidance, maybe member states can implement all over, because this is the European sense of staying. If you want to travel, you at least want to know, if I go from Madeira to stay some days in Austria, in Italy, you need to know at least what are the rules to undertake there. So it's positive. But what I wanted more, all measures are quite positive, but you need to have a backstage, a financial backstage. So that's why we missed here at least a light, one point that could say, okay, for these measures, we will have a budgetary line to implement and to help member states to implement that. For several years, at least the last mandate, from our EPP side, we are asking, and we promoted on the Parliament to approve on the next multi-annual framework on 21-27, we wanted that budgetary line. So now it's the time, if we want all member states to have better conditions and to give a better answer to this crisis, and especially because, listen, we are speaking about a sector that is composed mostly by micro, small and medium enterprises, but mostly for micro enterprises. So if you want to reboost the economy, to help these enterprises, these businesses, you need to have a backstage and a background support. That is why we think it's missing. But we are waiting, of course, for this recovery plan that will be launched in the few days or in the few weeks about the Commission. We already know that maybe the support is coming, so maybe it's a positive added value to this package that it was already launched.
And that links into a question we received before we came on today. What can the tourism sector expect from this package? What can the small business who's lost out expect? I suppose we just have to wait and see what comes out this week.
Yes, they expect for the immediate, because we are already talking about 2 or 3 months of losses. These enterprises are losing because they are receiving zero. But there are fixed costs that the enterprises need to maintain. And also, we are speaking about jobs. We want that all enterprises at least try to maintain the jobs of people who work in tourism. So this is being very, very difficult, and is being hardly hidden the countries or the regions that have tourism, as I said in the beginning, with a huge impact on the GDP. So maybe these conditions, this help that can be provided by the European community, the European Commission, and in this recovery plan, needs to be at the first step financial help with grants, or at least with a moratorium that gives the opportunity to the enterprises to re-establish. Because, as you know, tourism sector, it's hardly eaten, but in the time, it will be the one that it will need more time to readapt. And so this budgetary help that the enterprises will need for the moment, it's very important that these moratoriums can be extended on time, and not giving enterprises much more difficulties in these hard times.
And on the issue of the borders, I mean, things are different everywhere, it seems, at the moment. There are bilateral arrangements in some countries with other neighbouring countries. Other countries has, as you mentioned, that quarantine period of 14 days, which would defeat the purpose of going on holiday if you have to isolate for 14 days. Would you like more coordination with all of this in terms of reopening the borders?
Well, of course, that would be very positive, but we also need to respect all regions because they have different kinds of sanitary or health conditions. So that's why it was also positive from the members from the European Commission to launch that site or application, an app that can provide different regions how the health conditions are being secured or insured, and then this can give or can help to give a better answer on the reopening of the borders. Of course, that this quarantine, there's a question that we need to ensure is that we respect and that we don't condition the entrance of any kind of citizens. We need to respect that. So gradually, this will be done with the open of the borders, but of course with the quarantine that needs to be reopened. I gave you the example of Madeira. I think that this could be an example, of course, also for other regions, as I know that Baleares also will do, and other regions need to see the conditions, the health conditions, and if it's possible to reopen it without discrimination. This is crucial, because we cannot discriminate citizens or travelers for coming of other countries and not giving them the chance to make their vacations on at least on this summer according to the rules that we want to be implemented slowly.
Another issue that it's been quite divisive really in Parliament, and it's the issue of reimbursement for passengers who had flights cancelled, and whether or not they should get vouchers as reimbursement or cash. Where do you stand on it?
Well, the consumer has always the right to request a refund, but the rules they were not as well accommodated with this pandemic in the beginning. Well, we know that the amount of cancellations since the outbreak put at stake travel agencies, a tour operator, cruises companies, airlines in conditions that we need or we needed to rethink, because from one side you have companies that are not receiving anything because they are closed, more or less closed, but then you have also the consumer rights that need to be protected. Well, what it is on this package is that the consumer has always the right to request the issue, but also for companies and tour operators and agencies, we need to understand that they are connected on a value chain, on a value chain, that they are also depending on the reopening, on the restarting. So I think that this point of the reimbursement for the conditions is important for the consumer, but of course we also need to have in mind the companies for at least if they are in the case of insolvency. We need also to have this in mind. So I think that the conditions that the Commission presented, it's a kind of positive, because you also give the opportunity for at least in a period of a year or 18 months to give the opportunity to the enterprises to reopen and have the possibility to give this reimbursements. So it's kind of positive, because it looks to the consumer's rights, and it also gives this temporal space for businesses to have their businesses back in road.
Just on the social distancing, it seems to me that a lot of businesses are maybe one step ahead in terms of planning. We see things like beaches with markers laid out, restaurants and bars coming up with new different ways to socially distance. Do you see that yourself where you are?
Yes, everything will change from this crisis on. Well, one thing that you have, it's that destinations in their position have not changed. You have the product. You need to sell the product in a different way. Because as well, here, giving the example of Madeira, you will have also the sun, beaches. Well, the product is here. Well, you need to have in restaurants, in hotels, several kinds of rules that will change the way that we are living. And at least at the moment that we have a vaccine or other solution for this pandemic, this virus, you will need to have common rules. Of course, that we will respect more. We see already in this week, with the reopen here in Portugal, with the reopen of restaurants and not bar restaurants, you see some people that are starting to go and respecting the rules with the alcohol gel, with masks, with respecting the social distance. So it's good to see this restarting, but this would also change our way of living as tourists. And in the side of the enterprises, most of them will pass difficult times, because to respect this social distance, when you speak about small enterprises or small restaurants, to reduce the capacity of those restaurants, I don't know if they will have the capacity to maintain their businesses, not having the income that they used to have. And also the way that we travel will be more, I don't know, more efficient, more with more health conditions or health worries that we need to change. But we know, we are seeing, at least in restaurants, you know, that's plastic or glass panel. Also, in the reopening of the beaches, we will have this reopen here in Portugal on the 6th of June. And we are trying to see how it will. The Commission also send some guidance on that, but with those specific rules on social distance, we need to see how it will be. We already speak about drones that will make the surveillance of the beaches, or monitoring the occupancy. But well, this also goes aligned with your liberty, with your. We will need to see it step by step, because today we are speaking correctly on these rules, but the instability of the times, the instability of this virus also will need to, or will make us to rethink day by day or week by week, with the conditions and with the happening and reopening, if these measures are correct or implemented, or if we need to switch for other kind of perspectives or other measures to guarantee the reboost of the economies and also the confidence and trust on traveling.
You know, we had some questions, but I think you've covered pretty much most of them at this stage. Just one more before I leave you go. For people watching this, they're thinking, you know, we're nearly into June now. I'd really like to go on holiday. It's been a tough few months. What should they do? Should they wait and see what happens, or should they go ahead and book something? What's the advice?
Well, I don't have the crystal ball to say when is the precisely date to reopen each member state. But of course that we need to regain confidence. So I think that we can start planning our trips having in mind that with these rules, with these concerns that all enterprises and businesses are having in mind to reopen because they want to reopen, also the governments that are taking into consideration all the rules to implement in the airports, in the ports, for the cruises also to restart. I think that we can trust that regions and especially destinations that were awarded several times with international awards, they will do the best to prepare the region, prepare islands, prepare countries to receive tourists with the best conditions ever. Well, think in restaurants. It's an easy example, but think in restaurants. If this is not the moment that we can go to restaurants, because the best way that they are leading with this is that they are implementing the rules, the sanitary, hygienic rules, social distance rules. So I think that we can restart on thinking to travel. Of course, we will need to choose the destinations. Maybe this seal, this guarantee that some destinations are providing to travelers to see, yes, you can come visit our regions or our destination. This will be a good seal, a good guarantee that they are providing trust to reopen. But of course, this is a circle of responsibilities, and first we need the reopening of borders, then we need all transport modes that restart their ways of working, and then our confidence on traveling. But maybe for this summer we can already choose some destinations that are well prepared or certified to provide this safe travel.
And maybe when it's all safe, we can all go to Madeira Island and see what it's like there. We leave it there. Claudia, thank you so much for joining us today, and thanks for answering the questions sent in by our audience. And
thank you so much for the opportunity, and safe travels too.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.